Today we have Larry Krasner, who was born in St. Louis.
Oh,
Uh,
St. Louis.
a
Yeah.
distinguished attorney and the current DA of Philadelphia. He earned his degree from the University of Chicago and Stanford Law School, focusing on criminal defense and civil rights. And he has defended the rights of marginalized communities
That's right.
throughout his career. After founding his own law practice, Larry became a passionate advocate for criminal justice reform, holding police accountable
Yeah.
and reducing incarceration while addressing the root cause of violence. Larry lives in Philadelphia with his wife of 37 years.
Woohoo!
Y'all already know what to do. Let's give a warm We Talk Weekly welcome to District Attorney Larry Krasner.
Hey, how are you? How are you?
So, were you talking about me when you said young man?
Young man, that's right.
Yes.
Because I am a young 64.
All
If
right.
that's what you mean.
64 is the new 44, okay?
Fantastic. Before we start this interview, I like to ask, all our guests, how are you? How you feeling? It's current days. I mean, now, they ramping up. Or you've been out in the streets pretty much every day, all day long with, this election coming up. So how are you feeling? How was your day? Yep.
Well, it was a long day, but it was kind of a nice day because I got to spend my day with outsiders.
Yeah.
I got my doubts about insiders.
Mhm.
I'd rather spend my day with outsiders. So it was a good day because I didn't have to spend much time with insiders.
Insiders. I got you. So let's start with some, let's start with some insider stuff in terms of you per se, as it relates to, your advocacy work and what got you into, just law specifically, and then let's walk up into where we are today. But we like to kind of like humanize the person who we have there, just to get to know them about who they are. So I guess your parents, were they into law? Did they get you in it? Do you have siblings like, yo, you talk real good, we need to know, like, what are you doing? So what got you into that? Yeah.
Well, my parents were pretty idealistic, but none of them were lawyers. And as far as I know, I'm the first lawyer in the family.
Okay.
But, I mean, that was a better version of the truth, what you just did there when you said my brothers and sisters would all tell me that I'm good with words.
Okay.
Actually, what my brother said is you just like to argue.
Ah.
Because I came out of college, I was thinking of doing 3 different things.
Yeah.
And he's just like, be a lawyer. You just like to fight with people. You just like to argue. So I became a lawyer, but it actually had a lot to do, because I was undecided coming out of college. It had a lot to do with being selected to serve on a jury
Okay.
in a homicide case, which was actually a potential death penalty homicide case. And by the time I was done serving on that jury, I just knew I wanted to be a lawyer doing criminal justice.
Yeah. Now, your first, you graduate. Well, so you graduate and you come to the position, or you come to the understanding that this is what I want to do. Your first law school, you go into law school. What was that like?
Law school's awful.
No.
Anybody who tells you otherwise, not being honest. And the most awful thing about law school is the other law students. That, I gotta say, it's like college, I really enjoyed in a lot of different ways, all kinds of different creative people coming from different places, having great conversations into the night.
Yeah.
I got to law school, just kind of like, can you stop name dropping? Can you stop telling me what fancy prep school you went to? I went to public schools.
Yeah.
Can you just stop showing off in the classroom? We've heard from you 3 times. The class is 1 hour. We need to confine you to 1 time. We don't need to hear you 3 times. So I was not in love with law school, but I have truly loved being a lawyer ever since. I really like to try cases.
Right.
My career before I became DA was spent trying cases 4 to 5 days a week. I thought it was important. I thought it was interesting. I just didn't think I had enough sweeping impact.
Yeah.
And now as a DA, I have much more of a sweeping impact.
Yeah. And how do you believe that impact parallels or supports your initial vision of what you were doing?
Well, every road is windy, but it really is very consistent. I mean, if you go back to something nobody else remembers, but I remember because I did it, which was being at this very studio, the public access cable studio, where I did my announcement in 2017
Yes, I was there.
that I was going to run, and everybody laughed and laughed and laughed. If you remember that, at that time, I said we need to get more people out of jail.
That's right.
Mhm.
We need to work on prevention.
Mhm.
We need to use forensics to solve more cases.
Yeah.
And, even though the details shift, the values have not shifted. We are a significantly less incarcerated city than we were.
That's right.
I can give you the specifics, on this day, which is the 10th of May, 2025, as we're recording this, or maybe it's live, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
Yes.
on this very day, we have fewer homicides than we have had on this day for the last 50 years.
This day.
That's right.
Well, give a round of applause for that, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
So, it turns out you can have your safety and
Yeah.
you can have your fairness. We've let 45 people out of jail who were basically innocent people sitting in jail for somebody else's crime.
Yeah.
You can have your safety, you can have your fairness, and you can have your freedom all at the same time. And they work together, because when you stop spending crazy money to lock up people who don't need to be there, now you can fund your public schools, your mental health treatment, your drug treatment, all this, all the, I mean, look, I went to public school. I went to public school, inner city St. Louis, and out here.
Right.
We had a school nurse.
Yeah.
We had a
that's
school
right.
counselor.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
classes were usually like 22 people in a class,
Mhm.
not 35.
That's right.
That's how you get the work done.
Yeah.
That's how we have to do it. But it's not what we've been doing for the last 40 years, when we took all those resources, all that money, and just built more jails.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. My question
Mhm.
is, basically, you've been in the community, you've been to the recreational centers, you've been to the barber shops. What do you think, in your opinion, is the most pressing issue within Philadelphia as far as community?
Wow. Such a great question. Well, pressing issue within community. In many ways, I think community is actually the key to all of our pressing issues. I almost feel like it's not about going into the community to fix a problem. It's more like when we engage community the right way, it fixes most of our problems.
Mhm.
One of the things that we have seen in the last 7 years was that when we took this money that we receive because it's confiscated from drug dealers, other people who are committing crimes, and I can't use it for salary.
Right.
So we have to put it back into
Mhm.
community to try to fix the harm that criminal activity has caused. What we've seen is there are so many good organizations in the community, little mom and pop, 501c3,
That's right.
nonprofit,
That's
community-based organizations. And when you give them a little money, which is what we've done, and we only give between like $5,000 and $50,000 to these groups, right?
Mhm.
And instead of going to the big organizations with the big budgets, you go to the little ones where they've been running off of
That's right.
goodwill and, paying for it out of their back pocket. You get a tremendous return. We just gave 28 organizations little bits of money. The total for all 28 was about $1.2 million. And that now completes almost $5 million of putting money into these little organizations. The work that they do is so impactful. It is so effective.
Yes.
Yeah.
That we are, I'm able to sit here and talk to you at a time when Philly is still the poorest of the big cities, at a time when there's more guns on the street today than yesterday. And yesterday there were more than the day before.
Yeah.
And I could keep saying that for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
How is it that we have so many more guns on the street 50 years in, and we're still broke, and we have the lowest number of
That's right.
homicides?
Mhm.
And I'm telling you right now, modern enforcement has its place, but investment in community-based organizations, that's how you bring down crime and incarceration. You bring them both down at the same time.
I 100% agree with that. And I think one of the issues that I have always had with leadership was the idea of creating all of these new bright ideas and policies when you have people that's in the streets, people that's in those communities that's already doing the work, that's working, right? And so to move that or to displace that because you believe your idea is accurate or the right one, it does a disservice to the community. And so when we talk about civically engaged in the community, I think that's one of the biggest faults that I see with leadership. All right. And so what do you believe, and what do you believe we can do with sharing more information, or giving the idea that let's look more into those communities, because essentially that becomes the community policing part, right? Ms. Johnson knows Eric, John, Day, and Mark that grew up on that street and can go to, look, I know your parents, y'all better go in the house. I have seen it happen, right? So what do you believe the solutions are as it relates to that?
Well, what you're talking about is that unique credibility and understanding that people who are on the block have.
That's right.
I lived in Mount Airy for 26 years. I lived near the corner of West Horder and Emlyn Street. And I watched kids grow up across the street.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would hire them to shovel snow or cut the grass or this kind of stuff. And some of them came out really well. You know, one of them, young man, got in trouble for stealing grandma's car. But right now, you know, he's had an excellent military career. He has a great life. He's really an expert in very technical things.
Right.
Another one of them actually died young, and he was a drug dealer. You know, and it wasn't, sadly, the only death that we had in the neighborhood of a young person. There was another one, which also occurred. There is a unique ability that people on the block who are concerned about the young people on the block have to bring things together. It's not just solved by naming another government entity. It's not just solved by sending another police officer who doesn't know the community there. No disrespect to the police, because they have a very important role. But what you're describing is real. I mean, you know, I guess I'd be stealing somebody else's phrase, but a village get some things done.
That's right.
They just don't get done if you act like, well, society is broken, we need to helicopter in and fix it. You have to let society have the resources to fix itself. You have to stop tearing down society. You got to start meeting people's basic needs. And it is true all over the world that when you meet people's basic needs, you have a lot less crime.
That's right. That's right.
So the murder rate is down.
That's right.
It's come down significantly since 2021. Could you talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done, especially collaborating with judges, the police department, and the Public Defenders Association, all the work that you guys have done? Could you, for our listeners, could you talk a little bit about specifically the things that you've done to reduce those numbers from 2021 up until now? Because there's people that are like, you know, even the ones that are not as informed and they're not tuned in, they don't know what's going on behind the scenes. They may just hear about the numbers coming down. But can you talk a little bit about what you've done to see that decline?
Sure. Well, you know, excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold, but it takes many different forms. And, you know, it includes things like expanding diversion. Diversion is a way of holding people accountable who are basically not criminal, but they made a mistake. And we're trying to steer them in the direction of doing the right thing by not making it impossible for them to get a job. You know, you get a conviction, especially for a felony, you may be unemployable the rest of your life. And that's, if you're out shooting people, too bad. But if what's going on is you made a mistake, you're basically a good person, then I would rather make you work really hard and end up with no conviction, because I know that in the long run, society will be safer if we do that. So we've done a lot with diversion. We started a restorative justice program that never existed before. We started an immigration unit to deal with the issues of victims, witnesses, and also sometimes defendants who are undocumented. We've done a lot of that stuff, but what I think a lot of people probably know the least about is what we have done in terms of using forensics. In other words, using cutting edge science to solve cases that were not being solved before. And it's pretty clear in my mind that what we've been able to accomplish there is permanently shutting down certain shooting groups that, you know, many of these shooting groups have gone on for decades in Philadelphia, and the police would get an individual in that group for a murder or for a shooting, take the individual down, but the group went on. And it even went on to the point where you had the grandkids of whoever was in that beef 30 years ago, and they're beefing, but they don't even remember how it started. I mean, it went on like that. But it's a different world when you have cameras in a lot of places, when you have license plate readers in the city that are looking at publicly visible license plates and they're charting the time, the location, the date. They were in a particular place. When you have cutting edge DNA that will allow us to get tiny amounts of DNA off of things you could hardly even imagine. Things like a fired cartridge casing. That's the brass end of a bullet that flies out of a semi-automatic gun when you fire it. Imagine a world where you can have a bullet, have an explosion, get incredibly hot, fly out of a gun, bounce on the sidewalk, and we can pull DNA off and know who loaded it. I mean, that's just an amazing thing.
Wow.
So, you know, when you start to have a bunch of machines that will crack open cell phones, they'll get past passwords, and now you're able to put together an entire case off of things like the geolocation that's in that phone that shows where the phone was at the time of the shooting. Where was it before? Going towards the shooting. Where was it during the shooting? At the shooting. Where was it after the shooting? Running away from the shooting. This is how you start to solve crimes that were never solved before. It's how you start to make it so that young people who are thinking of picking up the gun tonight decide this is not the night. You know, it has made a tremendous difference. So for me, prevention is absolutely key. But it's also key that Philly catch up with other cities and that we have the ability to solve more cases, leave more mothers with answers about whatever happened to their child than we have been able to do in the past.
So are you concerned about any of the things that could be coming down the pike when it comes to some of the executive orders that have been passed affecting what you're doing? And if you're elected, what you plan to do?
Well, I'm very concerned about that lunatic we have in D.C. I mean, let's call it what it is. You have an orange man with gold shoes whose hair goes backwards, and this dude, you know, I mean, frankly, if he came to my house in Mount Airy and he wanted to sell me anything, I would say get off the property, and that would be the first time I saw him before I knew who he was. I can't even understand the suit. I can't understand why the tie hangs down to his knees. I can't understand why anybody believes a single word this wacko says. So I'm very concerned about him. But, you know, and I think he fully intends to try to take over the government of the United States. I think he fully intends to carry out a military coup, but I also think he's going to fail. Okay. I think what's going to happen is the public are going to get more and more sour on what a nut he is. And that by the time we get to the midterms, the Democrats are going to take back the United States House, which is now controlled by Republicans. I think they're going to take back some of the spots in the Senate. I think we're going to see the public get more and more disgusted with how this man is trying to rip off everybody and break everything. So I'm hopeful in that regard. But in terms of his specific executive orders, well, let me see. One of them was we're going to end birthright citizenship. And the court said, no, it's in the U.S. Constitution. You can't just write crazy on a napkin. Okay. You know, other ones that he's come up with are that he's going to order local law enforcement to do immigration enforcement. And the answer, once again, is no. The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says you can order federal law enforcement to do it. Not many of them, but you can't make local mayors, local police commissioners, local prosecutors do it. And I've already said publicly many times, no, it is not my job to do your job. I'm going to stick with the homicides and the rapes. Thank you.
That's right.
You can spend your time dragging people who, for the most part, are just here to try to support their kids and and be able to eat. You can drag them out the front door so long as you do it lawfully, but I ain't helping, right? So, you know, once again, people talk about how he's going to cut off money to sanctuary cities or welcoming cities or constitutional cities, call them what you call them. He tried this in his first term. He tried it against Philly. He lost in the courts. The courts at that time said, you can't do this. So he writes a lot of stuff. He holds a Bible upside down. He's got funny hair and silly clothes. And he wears a girdle. I mean, let's be honest. We all know that man's wearing a girdle, right? But I'm just not that intimidated by this foolishness, you know. And if he wants to lock me up, I hope you all visit me.
You know, what's funny about this is that, you know, you stand 10 toes down as it relates to truly supporting and protecting the community. I think, and this is a personal opinion, not necessarily reflecting views that we talk weekly, but what I will say, however, is because we talk weekly is nonpartisan, right? We don't pick any sides. I always say that I'm always for the person who I see that's actually in the streets that's doing the work. And I see you doing the work. I believe that you have been getting an unfair rap, so to speak, as it relates to the work that you tirelessly do for the community. I want to know your opinion or your feelings or opinion on, you know, the perception that some have of you, your naysayers, but those that's in my circles don't necessarily feel that way, right? And so it's starting to look very peculiar as it relates to, and dare I say, conspiracy, but it does look really peculiar when I see people who are really supporting the community, helping the community, but you have a mass amount of kind of like wave of, well, that person isn't right, something is wrong with that. What is your position on it, or your take on it?
Well, my mother was, I come from a very interesting background, but my mother was an evangelist. She was a tent preacher. Among other things, she used to say, you know, you're doing something right when you angry up the
That's
devil.
right. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And I was just talking about Donald Trump, so I guess that's the devil. Because he does have Philly in his mouth and got my name in his mouth now and then too. So that's kind of how it happens. What do I think about that? Well, I don't want to be so dismissive because that's not fair.
Right.
But, you know, I did start this whole thing by saying I had a good day because I was with the outsiders. Okay.
That's right.
You're talking about the 1.55 million people in Philly who are outsiders. There's probably 50,000 who are insiders. And the heat that we get is usually coming from people who are making a lot of power and they're making a lot of money off of things continuing the way they were under Seth Williams or under Lynn Abraham. For example, you know, I got impeached, I say, by the Pennsylvania legislature, meaning a whole bunch of Republicans who live in counties that are either named after coal or they're named after elk, right? Those dudes.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted to impeach me and they said from jump, well, he didn't do anything corrupt.
Right.
He didn't commit any crimes. That's not the point. We don't like his ideas. We don't like his policies. Do you know why they didn't like my ideas and my policies? Because they make a lot of money off of having the 13,000 Philadelphians who were in their state prisons.
Wow.
Yes.
There, they make $60,000 a year per person, locking them up. And now we're not at 13,000. We are at 9,000. So, I mean, they are boohooing like you haven't heard about the possibility they might have to close a jail. These are Republican leaders who have failed their people. When coal disappeared, they didn't have an answer. When steel disappeared, they didn't have an answer until they decided, we got it. Let's take a bunch of people from Philly, lock them up here and make money off of that.
Yeah, because their address becomes the jail where they live, not the Philadelphia where they stay.
This
Correct.
is a very important point too, that when you take a Philadelphian and you move them to another county in, I think 48 out of the 50 states, that person is counted as living in,
That's right.
Elk County or whatever it is. And that gives them highway funds and that gives them more political representation. This is highway funds for people who can't drive because they're in jail.
Right.
This is political representation for people who can't vote yet because they're serving a sentence and they're in jail. It's a pretty twisted up system. So they're not only filling their tax base with taxes from correctional officers, because that's the only employment these loser leaders have been able to manage for their county, but they're getting all kinds of power. And we all know what's going to happen to the, I said it, loser leaders who, if they don't succeed in keeping these prisons full of people who don't live there, because heaven forbid, they don't want to lock up people who live in their own county. Those people might vote against them. Their families might vote against them. So what they want is a nice conveyor belt of Philadelphians out to their prisons who they can incarcerate for as long as possible, get all that money in and stay in their office as a state rep or as a state senator. Well, we stand in the path of that. We've reduced the number so drastically that it's literally worth billions of dollars they're not getting. They're starting to hear about prisons closing. That means they might lose their jobs. And what do? They do what they do. So, you know, to me, that is actually good because it means we're having an impact. We angried up the devil.
I think that's a great, and I want to talk about this quote that you mentioned on an interview from, I believe, the young Turks. I have my own views on that, but you said we were able to stop our jails from becoming super spread of COVID, which was an additional and very important factor. And right now, we are enjoying the lowest number of people in county custody that anyone seems to remember. You know, we used to have almost 10,000 people in county custody. We're down to 3,600, and yet we simultaneously have lowest numbers of homicide in 50 years. I thought that was pretty profound. Why do you think that's one of the facts? That's a fact, ladies and gentlemen. Why do you think that's one of the facts that we don't hear about as Philadelphians as it relates to your office?
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but unfortunately, there has been a long history of not having really accurate politics, entertainment, or reporting. Just to give you another example, this is probably something you've never heard, but it's something I didn't know until I had some people who do data in my office check it out. Do you know that the homicide rate in the Republican states, which are the states that voted in the last presidential election for a Republican president, the homicide rate in the Republican states, you know, Republicans, the ones who supposedly are tough on crime and they know how to fix everything, homicide rate is 133% of the homicide rate in the Democratic states for the last 25 years. Wow. 24 of those 25 years, you have been in more danger of being murdered in a Republican state than in a Democratic state. That has never come out of the mouth of Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, or any Republican. Instead, we get to listen to Richard Nixon, a criminal, talk about law and order, or Donald Trump, a 34-time felon, talk about law and order. That's a problem that our society does not know that, you know, and this is not just about politics. Those Republican states have a set of policies. They love the death penalty. They want everybody to have guns. They don't want social programs. They don't want public schools. They don't want to allow, choice about your reproductive rights. It goes on and on. That's what they want, and that kills people. And yet you probably have never heard that before.
Haven't,
because it's just not covered as fully as it should be.
Wow. Here's another quote from you, which was very interesting. You said, "We know that the length of sentencing is not really a deterrent, but what is a deterrent is fear of getting caught. That's about how many of these cases you can solve and whether you can solve them quickly or you're only solving them 30 years later." When we think of that position of the fear of getting caught, what is the impetus of that? Is it that, oh, I'm getting caught, so I'm gonna go to jail? If we're saying that once you're in jail, we don't care about how long we're in there.
That's a really fair question. I'm not saying that there should be, I'm not saying that kill somebody, get probation is the same thing as kill somebody, get 20 years. I'm not saying that.
For sure.
What I'm speaking of is more like, does it really matter whether it's 25 years or 20? Does it really matter whether it's 25 years or 15? And all the criminological research shows that what really stops people from picking up the gun on a Thursday night is that they're afraid they're going to get caught. They're not actually sitting there saying, well, I'll do it and get caught and do 15. But if you're telling me there's a mandatory 25, in that case, I'm out. Nobody is signing up, for a lengthy sentence. And this is, after all, the most locked up, incarcerated big country in the world. It's also one of the most violent countries in the world, locking everybody up for long periods of time when you have low rates of solving them. There are places where homicides are only solved at a rate of 10% or 20%. There was a study of shootings of African-American men in Philadelphia. They looked at 5,000 shootings over a period of years. 1,000 were solved. 1,000. How scared is someone of a 20% chance of getting caught? A little bit, right? Not nothing. But wouldn't they be a whole lot more scared if it was 45% or if it was 52%? Isn't that more like, come to think of it, I'll just sit here with my PlayStation instead of going on that drill because my knucklehead friends told me we should.
Yeah.
Why do you think the Philadelphian, especially within the youth of Black men, ages 18 to let's say 35, is very low for voting? Why do you think that is, and why is it important for them to come out and vote?
That is a really interesting question. And I think, strangely enough, I have an answer. And that is this. I think there are an awful lot of people who don't vote at all or who are unlikely to vote because they don't feel like government has done anything for them. They feel like everybody chases them for a vote and then goes away. And I mean, I'll be honest, a lot of them are right. That is kind of what happens. What we have seen, though, when I ran in 17 and in 21, and I hope what we're going to see again pretty soon, is that there's a lot of people out there who are really touched by criminal justice issues. Hundreds of thousands of people who have suffered a conviction. Not all of them deserved it. Some of them absolutely did, but they've had a conviction. It's affected their life, or someone they know whose drug addiction was not addressed properly and died of a fatal overdose. People thinking back on the person they dated in high school who now is unemployable because he sold, 12 bags of drugs on a street corner and now can't get a job. This is an issue that really touches a lot of people who don't necessarily vote. And what we saw when we started talking about these issues the way we do talk about them in 2017 is we saw a huge increase in voting. Okay. So, for example, when Lynn Abraham and Seth Williams were running, and they run in the same election cycle as we do, which is, one where there's no governor on the ballot, there's no senator on the ballot, there's no president on the ballot. So it's expected to be a low turnout. Well, Lynn Abraham and Seth would bring out 9% or 12% of the vote. So we run in 2017, and lo and behold, we bring out 19% of the vote. And then we run again in 2021. And everybody's saying, you'll never get that turnout. You just got that big turnout because of Donald Trump. Joe Biden had just been elected in 2021. So Philly's happy because Philly loves Joe and hates Trump, right? You'll never get 19%. We got 20.5%. Okay. It's the same phenomenon that we saw after the United States Supreme Court decided the case that took away, some reproductive rights. And you saw all of these young women who would not necessarily have voted otherwise. And not just women, but you saw a lot of people, most of them women, including ones who don't always vote, coming out to vote, coming out to march. So fundamentally, what has happened here is the parties have failed to connect with a lot of young voters on the issues that matter to them. And I regret to say, as a lifelong Democrat, the Democratic Party has failed in that too. That's part of the reason it's so important when you have a race that's simple like this one is. This race is about criminal justice, fundamentally. There's some judges on the ballot.
That's right.
There's a DA on the ballot. That's what it's about. It's so important to engage young people who care about those issues, to get them registered, get them to vote the first time. Because once you vote the first time, it is habitual. It's easy after the first time you do it, and you want to do it after the first time you do it.
The Meek Mill bill, Act 44, probation reform, you've been involved in that. How do you think, because now we're starting to see some progress with those cases in Pennsylvania, how do you think it's going to affect the success rate of probation, the recidivism rate, and prison reform, which you've also been working on?
Well, I can tell you that the criminology, the science around this is that the first couple years of supervision for someone on probation or on parole coming out of jail, those first couple years clearly do some good. The third year, it's kind of a wash, does some good, does some harm. But after 3 years, the criminology all says it just makes things worse. Not in every single case, but on average, it makes things worse. It tends to become a bunch of tripwires that people who are getting it together trip over, and then they end up back in jail. The things that really help are having close connection to family. It's having employment. It's being able to pay your bills. And if you think about what happens on probation and parole, sometimes you have to pay for your own supervision. You have to leave your family and leave your work to go to check in with a probation officer, which is not the best thing for your employer or hanging on to that job. And let's also remember, there used to be an awful lot of people going back to jail for what? Because they had THC in their blood. They'd smoked some weed. So here we have Judge Grumpy sitting up there. This man took down a nice chunk of a bottle of brown liquor the night before, because some judges do that. And he thinks some hardworking guy is the devil because he's got a little bit of THC in his blood, and he's sending that man off to jail because he doesn't know the difference between weed and heroin. Okay. That used to go on all the time.
Wow.
To some extent, it was generational. To some extent, it just had to do with people living in totally different neighborhoods, in different economic status, different kinds of experience. But to some extent, it was straight up discrimination. It was just Richard Nixon's crazy playbook all over for how he would get at the people who weren't his biggest fans. And those people, of course, were anti-war protesters and black people. And, to some extent, it's that. So sometimes it's good not to give judges so much control over the life of another human being forever. Let's do what is scientific. We know it helps to do proper supervision for the first 2 to 3 years, which is part of the reason that my office has a policy since I came in that you shouldn't do more than 3 years of supervision unless there's a good reason approved by a supervisor, unless the science supports it, or unless there's special circumstances. Just our policies have really reduced the amount of supervision by almost 2/3. And then the Meek Mill bill, as you put it, that is doing a lot of good too. It's relatively early in its effects, but I think we're going to see some very positive effects, especially if the Pennsylvania legislature continues to come with more good ideas.
Fantastic. You mentioned, I just want to back up a little bit because we were talking about voting and the importance of vote. One of the things that I'm very hard on is me feeling this particular election, right? Because it is a closed primary. And so everyone don't know it's a closed primary. We talked about the effects of closed primary. So, but that said, there's a lot of, there's little to no promotion, so to speak, for this particular election. We look at, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in the presidential election. Everyone is, yes. This election, no one even knows who the judges are. People know the DA, of course, but, we talk about people who's running, and these are most of the judges, right? Judges who potentially can be appointed later on to the Supreme Court that we're saying that we have a problem with right now, right? Why do you think there is no amplification during this election like it should be?
Well, my wife actually ran for judge back around the year 2000. Yeah. And she won. And she was on her second try, and she was on the bench for almost 19 years. She was actually an excellent judge all the way through. But she also was a political outsider, like I was. Unfortunately, this city has a pretty sad tradition of having the leaders, one leader anyway, of the Democratic Party pick people who are somebody's nephew, or pick people who did free work for him for the last 10 years. That is not how you pick the best judges in the world. The way you pick the best judges in the world is on their character.
That's right.
It's on their values. It's on their educational achievements. It's on their experience. It's on their life's work. If they have been civil rights attorneys for outsiders, if they have represented disabled people, if they did educational work for kids who are on the spectrum, if they spent their career doing other kinds of public service, genuinely directed at improving the world rather than just trying to line their pockets. In my opinion, those are the people you want. Right. But that's just not how it's worked. It has been a patronage machine for the longest. And unfortunately, sometimes certain leadership in the party will get behind candidates because they got money, because they're somebody's nephew, or because they did free work. And that's just not the way to do it. There is an answer to all of this, but it's a tough one. The tough one is because you're electing several judges every election cycle. This time it's going to be about 10 or 11 judges. Because you're doing that, they're almost all unknown people to the general public because they've just been working away as lawyers somewhere. They don't usually have a ton of money to get the message out about who they are. And there's kind of a long, sad tradition of people either, just picking people because they like that gender, or just picking people because they think that last name sounds like their last name, or just picking people because, the Democratic committee person, the Democratic ward leader told them to. So sometimes those ward leaders and committee people are doing exactly the right thing. and they've carefully studied them. But we all know the reality. Sometimes they haven't, and they're just being told from above what to do because somebody got some money in the back pocket.
A young guy comes to you and he's disgruntled, or he feels that I shouldn't vote, right? I don't care about voting. Why should I vote? I know you're running, but I'm not voting anymore because my vote doesn't matter. What would you say to him?
Well, I mean, if I was a smart ass, I'd say, who were you going to vote for? And then I take it from there. But no, all right, let me give you a serious answer. What I would say is what, the great Marion Tasco, who was a city council person here and one of the greatest political minds of any generation in Philadelphia, would say, which is vote like your life depends on it, because it does. It does. I mean, we are being affected in the most fundamental ways by having the wrong guy in the White House, by having some of the wrong legislators. This city will never get what it deserves from some of this upstate crew unless we are able to show big numbers. It's, if you want to look at the communities that have been the most ignored, the least served, the most damaged, they are overwhelmingly the communities that have not voted. It is something that has gone with poverty for a long time. It goes with other things, language barriers and so on. But I get it. This is probably a young person who has lived in a neighborhood where it doesn't seem like voting makes any difference. Doesn't seem like government makes any difference. I get that. But I would just hope they would imagine a world where a lot of these problems are getting fixed, where you don't have trash being dumped everywhere, where you do have a proper class size, where you can get the medical treatment that is necessary, where you don't have the entire city coming up with tax breaks for Comcast that are not available to ordinary working people, that sort of thing. And I guess that just sounds like a 64-year-old guy talking in a way that's not persuasive. But I would also invite him to go to the polls with me, because I'm telling you, for anybody who has not voted, the first time you vote, you get it. You start to understand what is at stake, and you start to feel that excitement, and then it becomes a habit that you're going to keep.
Speaking of elections, right? Speaking of the polls, you're running against someone, right? Dugan, I believe, right? Is it Dugan? Did I say that right? Dugan? So
I'm having a little trouble remembering his name right now.
So in all fairness,
did you say who?
In all fairness, right? Because we're nonpartisan, and so we try our best to be fair across the board. But in comparison to him, why should someone vote for you versus your competitor? What makes you stand out as the candidate for people to continue to have as DA of Philadelphia?
I think it's really the difference between actions and words. Words are really cheap in a political cycle. I still can't figure out whether my opponent is the great reformer he claims to be, or the hang 'em high law and order guy he is in the next sentence. He talks a real good game about police accountability, except for anybody who's familiar with the Josie case, which is an infamous case in Philly. He's the judge who said not guilty after he watched the video that made it crystal clear how guilty that much larger and brutal officer was, right? So I think ultimately you got to look at people's life's work. You got to look at what they have done rather than just listen to their words. But another way to look at it is real simple. He just talks over and over and over about doing things that are old, about going backward. We can't go backwards. This is a country that was the most incarcerated big country in the world, and also hyper violent. Philly's moving in the right direction. We have far fewer people in jail. We have far fewer homicides. What is the issue?
You've lived in Philadelphia for many, many years now. What makes this city feel like home to you?
Oh man, I mean everything. Everything makes it feel like home to me. I do a lot of travel to recruit. We recruit lawyers all over the country for a whole lot of reasons, including getting the best talent and getting really diverse talent. We go all over the country, and so I get to see a whole lot of cities. Some I know, like I know Chicago because I went to college there, and I love Chicago. It's actually the city that reminds me the most of Philly.
I can see that.
Other ones where I've never been, right? But a lot of people don't understand that this is a city with so many positives. It's a city where a lot of people are walking around Spend some time in LA. You think LA is nice? You better like the inside of your car, because that's where you're going to be.
Yeah.
all the time.
You know, it's a walking around city. It's a city where people, even if they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, because that's a Philly thing,
It is.
they will
Philly
talk.
grit.
They
Yeah.
got grit, but they will talk to you at that bus
That's
stop.
right. That's
They
right.
will talk to you
That's
on
right.
jury
Yeah.
duty. You know, they will engage with you on the street.
Yeah.
It's a very affordable city. This is a city that has a great restaurant life. It has a great musical and cultural history. You know, it's one of the better cities for riding a bike around, actually, in the United States, and which is important to me because I like to ride my bike. It's just, you know, it's just a city that is very, very livable. And I got to tell you, I remember the bad old days of Frank Rizzo.
Oh,
I once even met Frank Rizzo, you know. Philly's so much better. So much better than it was in the late 1960s. It's so much better than it was even in the early 2000s. It just keeps getting better. There is a reason why a lot of us consider the 5 boroughs in New York to be the boroughs of Philadelphia.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. You know, we say in Philly, we just say we're our own city and state. We're our own city and state.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. Favorite cheesesteak?
Ooh, D'Alessandro's.
Ooh,
Okay, all
okay.
right,
All right, no
yeah.
doubt. Where were you
Okay.
when the Eagles won?
Jumping up and down in my living room.
Me
You know,
too,
I
me
try to
too.
keep my athletic viewing near the kitchen.
Right.
That's key to me.
Mhm.
I find it more affordable as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, D'Alessandro. Everyone,
Yeah.
shout out to D'Alessandro's. If someone asked you, what is the legacy that you would like to leave, right? How would you answer?
I shouldn't say silence, right? What is the legacy?
What's the legacy?
Safer,
Okay.
fairer, freer,
Mm.
and now he gets to sit on the beach. How about that?
I like that.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
What are some of the biggest, or what would you say is the biggest misconception about District Attorney Larry Krasner?
Yeah.
What's the biggest misconception? I mean, this could be a book, right? There's a lot of
Yeah,
misconceptions. And I'm not trying to avoid your question, but honestly, I guess I don't really know. Because what I tend to know is what I do every day and what the numbers say. And that's kind of the world where I live. I don't actually spend all my time watching, you know, late night local news or hanging out at the Mayfair Diner to hear what the diners there might say, which might not be 100% positive, you know. I don't know exactly, but, you know, I do think the most important thing is just put your head down and do the work. Keep moving. Don't get too bothered when people say things that are untrue or say things that are inaccurate. I get more irritated at myself when they say things that are true, that are mistakes I made. But I also know I make mistakes every single day. I mean, that's just how it is. You have to. It's all about trying. It's about trying to be fair. It's about trying to do the right thing. It's about putting in the time. It's about connecting with community. It's about outsiders.
Yeah, fantastic.
Right.
So I just want to thank you for coming to the show. I know you're very busy, and I know it was some challenges in getting here, and so I really appreciate your time. I'm gonna give you my last question that I normally give to, you know, guests that I like, right? And I happen to like you, right? So the question that I have is, I want you to dig deep into that, you know, that library information. What's the one thing that no one else knows about DA Larry Krasner? No one else knows that you could tell us today.
Well, there's some things I can't tell
You
you.
can't say.
We won't get into that. But what's the one thing that nobody knows?
An exclusive.
Yeah.
Exclusive. I was friendly in grade school with a girl who does not professionally sing by the name under which I knew her when we were both in elementary school.
Okay.
But she has gone on to be a Philadelphia-based, nationally significant singer, and I will not tell you who she is.
You didn't tell.
Right. So now people gonna be Googling, well, where
I
did
know,
you
right?
go?
It's
How old
like-
was it?
All right, there you go. We talk weeklies after the
Right.
talk of WPPML.
Can I give a shout out real quick?
Yeah, well, no doubt. Give a shout,
Shout out to United for Strife. Thank you so much, DA Larry Krasner.
Yeah.
And when is the voting coming out?
We're gonna
The-
get there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
all
go ahead.
right,
No,
yeah,
finish. Go ahead. You just go.
that was it.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you could, kind of, let people at home know like the vote and that
Yeah,
information.
all that good old stuff. Where to vote, when to
Yeah,
vote,
where they
you
can-
know,
yeah.
how they can get in contact with you, all that good old stuff. Yeah.
All right. Well, number one, voting day is May the 20th. May the
Right.
20th of 2025. That
right.
is a week from Tuesday. The polls will be opening at 7 o'clock in the morning.
That's
They
right.
close at 8 o'clock at night, but not exactly, because if you're still in line at 8 o'clock at night, they will let you vote.
I didn't know
Do
that.
not
I
get
didn't know
out
that
of
either.
line.
Yeah.
Do not get out of line.
Wow.
Now, here's another important thing for people to know, and that is that even for people who have been in jail
Yeah.
for an offense,
That's right.
if you are in county custody and you're waiting for trial, you can vote. You can
Mhm.
vote before you are convicted of a crime. If you are
Mm.
serving a sentence of jail, you cannot vote while you're serving your jail sentence, but you can vote as soon as you get out of custody. There are a lot of people who have an old conviction and they are under the false impression that
Yeah,
they
they
can
can.
never vote.
Mm.
Wrong. In
That's right.
Pennsylvania, if you're not locked up, then you can vote even if you have a prior conviction, which is how it should be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
otherwise we're going to have a bunch of, we're going to be disqualifying so many people from voting, and they
Yeah.
have a voice and they have things to say.
Wow.
So that is true. It is too late to register to vote if you have not already
Yeah.
registered.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can go to City Hall and you can vote on paper if you wish
Yeah.
to do so. But for me, it's all about election day. I really enjoy the process of
Mhm.
going to vote early. I still remember standing in line in 2012 when Obama got elected.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Was that the
Right.
first time? Or was it 08? It was 12,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It was 08.
That's the
I
second.
still-
was the first
I
one.
still remember standing in line the first time in 08 and
Mm.
seeing at 7 in the morning in Mount Airy and seeing the line go around the block,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
It's really a moment. It's really
Mm.
exciting.
Right.
If you're the kind of person who feeds off of going to a live sports performance or going to a live concert, you are missing the boat if you don't go vote. You
That's right.
need
Yeah.
to go vote. It's really very exciting.
Take your children with you.
Take your
Yeah.
kids with
Yeah.
you. Take them in the booth. Show them
Mhm.
how it's done. That's how we can actually save this country from you know who.
No
Mhm.
doubt. Let me do this ID because you still ain't say how they can get in contact with you, but I got to do this name ID real quick. You're listening to We Talk Weeklies After the Talk on WPPMLP Philadelphia 106.5 FM. We Talk Weeklies After the Talk with your boy Charles Gregory and the beautiful.
Class-
and
Classy lady
And
sparkle.
beautiful.
Lawrence Sizzle.
This is Larry Krasner, and you can find me at krasner4da.com. That's KRASNERFORDA.com, where you can volunteer, where you can donate, and where you can learn more about what we stand for.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Look, this is our civic duty. It's very important for us to give the information to the people, right? When we talk about even, preventing false information, false narratives, right? It's better for you to hear them from the horse's mouth, so to speak, right? To hear the candidates who are doing some work to say some of the things that they're doing to truly know what's going on. You need platforms like this. That's why we always say support independent media, support We Talk Weekly, support people who are actually in those streets that's doing the work.